Okay,
No, here.
I'd like to call to order the February 15th, 2016 regular city council meeting. Hello, everybody. Would you, is Mr. Joe Garkovich here? Joe, would you come, I'm sorry, I butchered your name. Please rise.
Let us pray. God of creation, we thank you for another day. As this group gathers to do its important work, we pray that you would grant them wisdom, that you would give them guidance, that you would open their hearts, open their ears, and open their minds to all the opinions that are voiced this day. And all these prayers we send to you in Christ's name. Amen.
Pledge of allegiance. Thank you. Would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Troutman.
Here.
Council members Ekstrom.
Here.
Schumacher.
Here.
Gill.
Here.
Weed.
Here.
Shiraki.
Here.
Meisner.
Here.
Councilwoman Smith is excused. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Would like to call for approval of the minutes. Are there any corrections? Hearing none, could I have a motion and a second?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Meisner?
I move that we approve the minutes for the 2/1/26 regular council meeting and the minutes from the 2/3/16 general government committee meeting.
Second.
The motion's been made and seconded. Would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Meisner.
Aye.
Councilmember Weed.
Aye.
Councilmember Shiraki.
Aye.
Councilmember Schumacher.
Aye.
Councilmember Ekstrom.
Aye.
Councilmember Gill.
Aye.
Approved by unanimous vote.
Thank you. Are there any council members' announcements?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Ekstrom?
thank you. We have Public Works Committee meeting this Wednesday at 4 o'clock next door. And then second is regarding our progress on posting the city administrator job description. Before council is hopefully our final draft with the maybe correction that Councilman Weed wanted to point out. This is an ad that's going to go out in several different online and other professional forums as we begin our search for a new city administrator. Also, we have discussed the possibility and the options of bringing in a third party to serve as facilitator for us as council to help guide us through this process. And there'll be more information about that as we continue discussions, perhaps during a public works or a general government meeting. But tonight, before us, we want to get this out as soon as possible, so I was going to see if anyone had any final thoughts regarding this particular posting.
Thank you, Mr. Ekstrom. Any council member want to make a comment? Mr. Weed?
Yeah, I just, this is a real minor grammatical thing, at least as far as I'm concerned. In the second paragraph under education and experience, at the very end of the third line, sentence reads, candidates shall possess at a minimum of 5 years of experience. I think you should drop the of or drop the at, but I'd recommend dropping the of. So it would read, candidates shall possess at a minimum 5 years of experience. Could go the other way and have it say, candidates shall possess at a minimum 5 years, but one of those words should go, and I'd suggest of.
Okay, we don't have to have a debate on whether at or of, do we? Good. Thank you. We can go. we can go forward with that correction. Is that so? It's okay with everybody?
Yeah, so if it
Good.
pleases council, we'll go ahead and put these up tomorrow.
Good. Thank you all. Thank Scott and was it who else worked on that? Mr. Meisner?
Mr. Meisner, yeah.
Yep. Thank you too for doing that. I appreciate it, and to our HR department as well, as they helped that. I have to make an apology here. I had jumped the gun on that 15 minutes before each council meeting for open mic. That's going to start March the 1st. If I've inconvenienced anybody,
Seventh, Mr. Mayor.
March the 7th. You see, doing well here. The first meeting of March, which is the 7th, will be the meeting where we will start with having 15 minutes of open mic prior to the council meeting. While I'm doing that, is that where we would open the meeting and then have 15 minutes, or do 15 minutes and then open the meeting?
It was my understanding that we was going to have 15 minutes prior to the meeting, and at somebody mentions 6:16, we would start the official meeting. 6:15, something 16.
Okay. Is that okay? Is everybody okay?
I mean, I think that what you guys talked about at the retreat, and I'll talk about that, but I think that you talked about the idea, you keep the 6 o'clock time, because that's everybody's used to now. So that first 15 minutes would be just the open mic, or whatever you want to call it, and then the business, if you will, of the night would start at 6:15.
That's when we would do the call to order, correct? Mr. Havens?
Mr. Mayor, no need to go into it now, but there may be a very few circumstances, such as when there's a public hearing scheduled on a quasi-judicial matter, where you don't necessarily want the open mic open until the hearing occurs during the regular meeting.
I'm glad you mentioned. I would mention that if there's an item that is on the agenda for that evening, we would not want to discuss it at that time.
That would take care of it.
Thank you, thank you. Okay. So again, I'm sorry if I've inconvenienced anyone, and we'll hope to see you March 7th.
Well, I mean, if are they going to go up to the mic, or are they going to approach us? Because we talked about approaching
To the mic.
Well, then did we set up a time limit? Because someone could take the entire 15 minutes.
I think it would be 5 minutes.
5 minutes, so we've got enough
3 to
time
5,
for three
yeah.
people to talk. Okay.
Hopefully it wouldn't.
Just so we're clear.
Okay? Okay, thank you. The council appointments of the members of the planning commission, you have that. Could we have a motion and a second?
He's doing this under council members' announcements because we have a planning commission tomorrow evening. So we was looking for hopefully filling that seat this evening.
Do you need a motion to add an item?
I would,
You can just do it under council members' announcements if you want to make a
Oh,
motion.
okay, yeah. The city council needs to have a representative on the city's planning commission, and we haven't designated one yet, and that's a designation by council. And I would nominate Mark Gill as the council representative for the planning commission.
accept that,
Second.
Mark?
That's perfect, yes.
Yes.
Second.
Second, do we need to do a roll call on that? We need to do a roll call then. Would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Weed,
Aye.
Councilmember Schumacher,
Aye.
Councilmember Ekstrom,
Aye.
Councilmember Meisner,
Aye.
Councilmember Shiraki,
Aye.
Councilmember Gill.
Aye.
Approved by unanimous vote.
Thank you for helping me through that. Okay. Call for adoption of the agenda and the consent agenda. Doug, would you review the consent agenda items?
The consent agenda for tonight, the first item is to reappoint Gary Clark and David Raleigh to the Board of Adjustment. These two members have served a term that expired on December 31st of this past year, 2015. We've solicited letters of interest from people that might be interested. We have 4 positions that we are looking to fill. These two members are already have been on the board, and so we're asking that they be reappointed to the board. Other 2 positions, we are suggesting that the city council conduct interviews in the near future for those individuals. The reason that we're suggesting the interviews there is that because the Board of Adjustment is a board that actually makes decisions. You have some boards that are recommending boards, and some boards, try to promote things and so on. This is a board that actually makes decisions related to zoning and building kinds of things. So We felt that it was important to allow you to interview those two people. So we would suggest that we'll schedule a time that you can interview the two additional people here in the very near future. But the two people, Gary Clark and David Riley, would be appointed. Their new terms would now expire on December 31st, 2018. Next item is to reappoint Harry Benny Johnson, as we know him, and Rex Hubler to the Ethics Commission. These two have been serving on this commission for some time. Fortunately, they don't have a lot of work to do. But their current terms have expired on December 31st of 15, and they would be the two members on this committee. This is suggesting that we reappoint both of them with a term expiring at December 31st, 2017 on that commission. Next item is to appoint 5 new members to the Public Arts Commission. Now, the council may recall that on February 1st, you approved some changes to the Public Arts Commission bylaws that changed the membership makeup of the commission. It increased the number of members up to 9 as a maximum number. That would result in a 5-member vacancy. We think that this is a good approach for this commission. We have received 5 letters of interest to fill these positions: Carrie Jacobs, Mary Daly, Yvonne Caron, Benjamin Quiddick, I hope I pronounced his name properly, and Brad Kephart. So those are individuals that would like to serve. We're suggesting that these 5 individuals be appointed to fill these 5 vacant positions, and suggesting a staggering of terms. Now, the bylaws do require staggering of terms, or 3-year terms to be staggered. We're suggesting, and you can change this if you would like, but that Carrie Jacobs be appointed for a 3-year term ending in 2018, Mary Daly, 3-year term ending through 18, Yvonne Caron through 18, and Benjamin Quiddick. In this particular case, to offset that, be appointed through 2017, and Brad Kephart through 2017. So it would give that staggering that's called for under the bylaws. Next item is to reappoint Ann Weekly and Lynette Hunter to the Library and Museum Board, with terms expiring December 31st, 2018. These two have been recommended by the Library Board to sort of refill those positions. They would be a 3-year term expiring December 31st, 2018. Excuse me. Next item is to authorize the mayor's signature on a funding agreement for the Fremont Center for the Arts. This has been discussed several times with the various committees. Last time on January 20th, 2016, at the Public Works Committee. This would be a contract that the city would pay compensation in the amount not to exceed $21,600 for an entire year, or $1,800 a month. But in this agreement, as requested at the Public Works Committee, there is a termination clause that after 3 months, it could be terminated. That would be the end of March, should certain requirements not be fulfilled, and those requirements are outlined in this agreement. And it would require the committee, or the Arts Center, to bring back information to the council to indicate that they are progressing in terms of funding and attractions and so on. The funds for this were budgeted in the 2016 budget. Next item is resolution number 4 of 2016. This item was discussed at the February 3rd General Government Committee, and it would approve a lease, or a form of lease, I should say, that could be used as a point of bargaining or beginning discussions in the future for the use of city-owned property within the Royal Gorge Park, for the area known as Point Alta Vista, and this would relate to the operation of the train, the Royal Gorge Scenic Train that operates out of the Buckskin Joe property that goes out into the park, turns around at Point Alta Vista. So this is just an indication that the city has established an interest to proceed with some form of lease, but this resolution also establishes a negotiating team that would be consist of the city administrator, city attorney, 2 council members that would be appointed by the mayor, so that if this Did evolve to the point that there was actual operator up there that wanted to move forward with the lease. This is an indication that the city has an interest, but obviously would require finalizing the terms of a lease and then bringing that back to city council for final approval. Next item is resolution number 5, 2016. This is a resolution that would modify the conceptual master plan for the Royal Gorge Park. Since the fire, the city has adopted a master plan. We've amended that master plan that talks about the improvements that would come forward following the fire, and these would be improvements that would be undertaken by the bridge company. And this resolution would allow for the construction of a pergola in the area sort of over to the west of the existing theater. So you probably all remember that site. It was kind of a concrete area. There was an old pergola sort of in that area. This would be replacing it with a larger, substantially larger, potentially meeting area, place where people could eat and so on and so forth. We discussed this at the February 3rd Public Works Committee. Lastly is the list of bills for the last 2-week period.
Thank you, Doug. Are there any additions or corrections to the consent? Yes, Mr. Meisner?
I have a question. Is that when I'd ask it now? This is probably more for some Mr. Havens, but on the funding agreement for the Art Center, on page, on item C, which rolls into page 2, the last sentence states, until final payment or final installment is paid on December 30th, roughly. But then paragraph D allows us to terminate that or kind of change that, and then paragraph 3 allows us to change that. Is there any kind of conflict between those two statements?
I don't think so. If the final payment becomes earlier because of a termination event, then final payment would be upon the termination date. And then the final accounting actually will be in the subsequent year.
And then one more question that I apologize for not catching this earlier, but on the art board, one of the letters seems to be not correct. Or am I
Yes, she had applied for a position over at Fremont County. And so if you look at she included that because if you look at the one before that, she had a letter, she had an email and a letter saying that she wanted to be on this board. And then she had a question on there, so I included that. So she does want to be on that, and I ended up letting her know. I called and left a message for her on the weed board at the county. She would have to get a hold of the county.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Weed, did you have something?
Yeah, two things. They could come either before or after the motion, but I'm just curious, the current members of the Public Art Commission, did they have any comments, pro or con or none, about the potential appointees?
They're very favorable and would like to get it moving as soon as they can.
Okay. And then just the other comment is, since I actually served on the Board of Adjustment a long time ago, and the Board of Adjustment has some kind of unique rules of operation, and before we, or at some point, probably before we do the appointment, I think it would probably be beneficial for the members of this council to review and understand the rules and regulations of the Board of Adjustment. And we could do that immediately prior to interviewing.
We can put that in your packet. As soon as we land on a date for those interviews, we can get those packets out early because we've got the letters, so we can get those packets out way in advance and then have you guys look at that and then be prepared. You guys be prepared that day.
Generally, the city clerk and city attorney attend those functions, and if there are questions for either of us, we'd be there to field them.
Yeah, and specifically the rules that apply to the Board of Adjustment, I don't know, it's probably 8-10 years ago or some length, quite a while ago. The rules about the criteria for approval of a request for a variance changed significantly. And I would question, and maybe we would want to review those criteria.
We certainly can. I failed to mention the planner is going to be involved in that process as well. But among the three of us, we'll get it covered, we hope.
Okay.
Okay, now, were there any additions or corrections then, or was that just discussion?
Just discussion.
Okay. Do I look for a motion then from council in a second? Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council adopts the agenda and consent agenda.
Understand there's going to be an amendment to the agenda, is that still correct?
We're
To add an
in
item?
executive session? Is that
Do
what
we
you're
add, is that
talking
where we
about?
added here? Then,
My understanding was you guys needed to add an item number 8 to put an executive session on there, is that not correct?
item number 9,
9, I mean.
is that where we would put it in?
Unless there's a council member, I don't have a need at this moment to have that on there.
I do
regarding
not
the
have a
per-
need at this moment.
Okay, then you would approve the agenda as written then.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. We have a motion from Scott to amend, to approve the motion.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Weed. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, would you call roll, please?
Councilmember Ekstrom?
Aye.
Councilmember Weed?
Aye.
Councilmember Meisner?
Aye.
Councilmember Schumacher?
Aye.
Councilmember Sharaki?
Aye.
Councilmember Gill?
Aye.
Approved by unanimous vote.
Okay, thank you. Can we have the administrator's report?
First item, excuse me, first item is just a report on sales tax revenues. You probably saw in the chart that's included with the report that the news is that it continues to be good. Sales tax revenues were up in January 16 compared to 15. In January 2015, we received $559,000 in revenue. That was up to $570,000 in January of 16, so that's right at a 2% increase. And just for reminder purposes, I put a note in here that you could see sales tax revenue is up about 7.7, almost 7.8% for the entire year last year. So good news continues to be good in that regards.
What's our budgeted anticipated sales tax increase this year? Is it 2?
We, I think, budgeted like 3%, if I remember,
Okay.
3% increase overall. So we try to be conservative in that budget projection. And again, if we continue this way through the year, keeping our fingers crossed, we would certainly do well, so. Okay, next item is that just kind of a summary. City Council held its retreat on February the 5th, and I did include kind of a summary of the discussion items that the City Council discussed at the retreat, and I'll kind of go through those, and council members feel free to chime in if something was off or you talked about something else that's not reported here or so on. But the first item that the council talked about at the retreat is number one, the council really would like to continue to promote the vision that has been developed for the community. So that was something that council felt was important going forward. Second item is that the council felt that we should begin to develop several what were referred to as stewardship teams or committees that would begin to advance the vision that has been laid out. And we have areas of our vision, as people may recall, for example, we have a highway corridor plan, a downtown plan, the park area plan, and so on, the overall vision plan. And so several committees were identified. Being a Highway Corridor 50 committee, a community, what was just referred to a community recreation committee, one that begins to advance the ideas that are coming forward in the trails and open space and recreation plan. The downtown committee, we have a downtown plan, and the Downtown Development Authority was identified as sort of the mechanism to begin to move that forward if that authority goes forward. One was referred to as sort of an economic development committee, one that was really beginning to focus on sort of the economic development, the business development, facilities, business park, kinds of things that are coming out of these various plans and beginning to move those ideas forward. One of which was the community funding and grants. So the idea was discussed that we have all these various committees that are organizations that come into the city requesting assistance, and certainly there are many in the community that need assistance, are going to many good causes. But I think one of the things that the city council talked about is establishing criteria providing these grants to community groups so that the funding, as it goes out, is really going out for the purposes of advancing the community vision. And so not only would there be a committee that would be developed in that regard, but also the criteria, I guess if you want to call it that would be used to make sure that, you know, you're achieving that objective. Next item that was talked about, let me back up here for just a second. The council did talk about getting these teams set up fairly soon, with the idea that there would be one council member on the team, not controlled by the city. This is a real effort to get the community involved in each of these committees, and the vision work and moving that vision work forward begins to put ownership into the community. And that in general, the council talked about the idea of maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 people per team, a minimum of 5, to really kind of shepherd these things going forward. Next item that the council talked about at the retreat was the General Government Public Works Committee meetings. I think the group talked about the idea that would continue to be on the 2 Wednesdays of each month. The times would continue to be 4, but schedule, or at least contemplate that it could be up to 6 o'clock, really kind of managing the agendas to make sure that, you know, we have appropriate items on the agenda, appropriate length of items on the agenda, and really trying not to go beyond that 6 o'clock time limit. But to at least plan that it could go up to 6 o'clock. Something that the staff has been working on, that the council wants to move forward with, is the idea of adding video cameras in the room to the south of the city council chambers here, where the committee meetings take place, and that those video cameras would allow those meetings to be recorded. That way they could be broadcast onto the city's website over YouTube and other ways, so we can actually get the word out at the city council meetings about what's being talked about at those meetings. The city council talked about they want to continue a similar format in those committee meetings. You want to be able to put the items of public interest first on the agenda, so the people that are coming from the public for those public agenda items can come. Those items can be discussed. It gives them the opportunity to sort of come in and then leave if they would like to, and then leaving sort of what I just referred to here as general city business to the end of that discussion. Next item was related to the regular city council meeting format. We talked about this here just a minute ago, but the idea that we would begin a discussion at 6 o'clock, so that we continue the same schedule that we have in place now. It would be as the mayor referred to, sort of the open mic session if people want to come in and talk about any variety of items that they might like to talk about. They could do that. But as the attorney talked about, it would not be related to items that are on the agenda. So if you had a public hearing coming up, you know, that's a business item that was going to be for you. There would be an opportunity, a public hearing, to talk about that particular item. And so it's really just sort of general community issues, pending issues, things that are of interest to the public, really to inform the city council so that maybe at the future Public Works or General Government Committee, these are things that could be topics of discussion at a future time. And then begin the regular city business at 6:15. There's a little typo there, but at 6:15, so it kind of gives 15 minutes for that dialogue to occur. And then the thought process, at least at that time that I had noted, was that we would announce it at this meeting, and then begin to initiate this at the first meeting in March, when I think that date is actually March the 7th, if I recall the actual date. So, and then I think that one of the things that the council talked about is that they would really like to begin to try this idea as a way to get input from the community. If the council finds out that some adjustment is necessary, a longer period of time, a different period of time, whatever it may be, those adjustments can be made going forward into the future, but they would really like to to kind of get this ball rolling and see what it might develop over time. Another item that the council talked about was the idea of creating, excuse me, what was called a communications committee for lack of a better term, I guess. But it would be assigning a council member or maybe a couple council members to a group with the idea that the council would be able to get out and schedule radio and newspaper interviews on some regular or frequent basis about city business, so what's going on in the community, and so on. The idea that this communication committee could do guest newspaper columns and so on. So it's the idea that there's not just input coming in, but there's output going out from the city council. Next item was the discussion about beginning to involve local students. It was discussed, and the mayor took it upon himself that he would work with the high school and PCC to develop some kind of participation in processes for gaining input and involvement at the school level. I did mention to the two here for the newspaper that the police department, for example, has an effort that they have going involving students at the school as police chief of the day. So those kinds of things are things that I think that the city council is wanting to try to move forward in some sort of initiative format. Next item that the city council talked about came back to the streets. City council talked about the 1% sales tax for streets. This obviously went before the voters in November. I think it was rejected by 108 votes, if I recall the number properly. But the city council members, I think, after some discussion, concluded that they would like to once again put that question on the ballot in November of this year. And maybe try to do very similar kinds of things, but slightly different. One of the things that would be a little bit different would be to include maybe a 10-year sunset provision. Excuse me. The council would really like to try to get this discussion going in March of this year to try to initiate a community discussion and dialogue about this. Whether it's a 5-year sunset, 10-year sunset, that would be sort of worked out through those dialogues, but initially I think they were talking about some kind of a sunset provision going forward. That in terms of the street policy, kind of related to the one that we just talked about, I think the council members felt that it was important to continue to protect the good streets that we have. We have, we talked about the $400,000 that we budgeted in the past. This year, because of the increase in sales tax revenue, we have put another $313, so a little over $700,000 this year that will be going into street repairs and replacement. And I think the city council said it's important that we continue to protect the good streets that we have in the community. We do not want them to deteriorate further, and that we then, if we can get focused on the sales tax rate increase and maybe other mechanisms, that we can really then begin to hone in on street repair and replacement of those streets that are of a higher priority in that regard. So a downtown Wi-Fi, a public access type of an arrangement. The city council talked about this, creating some type of a public access to the internet downtown. But at the same way, something that visitors and residents both could be able to take advantage of when they come into the core area of the community, but also to use this as a way to promote to citizens and visitors information about events and community news, that things that are going on in our community. So that, for example, if visitors are coming through and they stop at restaurants, they could log on to this or somehow get onto it. And not only could they get access to the internet and surf the internet or whatever, but periodically it would bring up things about that's going on in Canyon City, so that it becomes a real information source for them and for our own residents, so that it gives them the opportunity to find out what's happening here in town. Centennial Park is something that the city council also talked about at the retreat. We have a Arkansas River draft plan, corridor plan, that has been developed, and I think the city council would like to move that corridor plan forward for discussion purposes and adoption in the near future. A piece of that plan is really beginning to look at the long-term future of Centennial Park and what kinds of improvements can be made to Centennial Park. I think that we've talked about in the past the idea of a splash park and things like that over in Centennial Park. But the things that we talked about was really beginning to take the concepts that were developed in the Arkansas Corridor Plan and begin to advance them into a little bit more detail as soon as possible, looking at areas for various age groups. So everybody could take advantage of the park, if you will. Looking for long-term solutions to the park's maintenance facility location. Does it stay where it's at, or is there a better location where it could go so that we could take advantage someday of that area and integrating that into the core of the park? I think the city council felt that it was important to get this sort of detailed plan moving forward soon so that they could formally adopt this plan. That plan then could be the basis of going out for grant applications as soon as possible to begin to make those kinds of improvements in the park. Next item was the trails plan. A trails plan, I think as most people probably are aware, Fremont County, the Eastern Fremont County Trails Open Space and River Corridor Plan was a plan that came forward. City partnered in that plan with the Rec District, the county, and many others. That plan was developed over a period of a year and through 2014. Plan came out in early 2015. I think the city council feels that it's important to move that plan forward for approval so that it could have a formal status within the city's comprehensive plan, just as the highway corridor plan has or the downtown plan has, and get that plan adopted. That plan had general detail about the Royal Gorge Park area as it was presented to the city council about 2 meetings ago at a committee meeting. We have developed additional detail since that time regarding parks up in the Royal Gorge Park area to get that detail incorporated into the park, into the trails plan, and then again, get that submitted to the city council so that it could be adopted as soon as possible. And as we all know, once you get these formal plans in place, it really gives the city a good, strong leg to go forward for grant applications. So that would be one of the purposes of getting that plan in place. Next item was the city's vision plan. And now, as you again may recall, the city had done some work back a year and a half or so ago that really brought forward a new vision for the community. So it actually laid out about 4 or 5 different strategies, and one of those strategies came forward as the recommended strategy based on public input, and that becoming this sort of authentic Colorado, the gateway to the authentic Colorado and the real West, and beginning to develop that idea in our marketing and what we're saying about our community. And I think the city council wanted to bring that forward for formal approval and adoption into the comprehensive plan as soon as possible. Next item is that the city council talked about the idea, and this has come up periodically, but the idea of beginning to bring forward on some kind of regular basis, either quarterly, monthly, whatever it turns out to be, some type of a community recognition type of a program where the council is recognizing the efforts of citizens, businesses, organizations, whatever it may be, for their contribution to the betterment of the community. Next item that the council talked about, and I've mentioned this a little bit earlier, the city council talked about the idea of moving forward with this Arkansas River Corridor Plan. And one of the items under that plan is to take a look at the zoning in particular parts of the river corridor and begin to look at the idea of beginning to rezone some of those areas that should be more consistent with the goals of that plan. So where you have plans of areas that you want to try to bring tourism, attract tourism into, that are currently zoned industrial, those two are not necessarily compatible with each other. So you really want to begin to bring that zoning into conformance with the overall goals and objectives of that corridor plan. Lastly, the city council talked about the idea of an office here at city council for the mayor and city council to use. That work is in progress. We're working on a space upstairs that the city council and the mayor could have access to, hold some kind of formal office hours or whatever, that schedule and all that would still have to be established. But that is going forward, and we have a space that we'd be able to use for that purpose. So I think that those are the things that hopefully cover most, if not all, of what you talked about. And anything else you'd like to share, feel free to do so.
Like, if our citizens do want that tax, I'd like to see more involvement with citizens if they do want to see the road tax just come forth, request to speak.
Thank you.
Because you guys voted it down, and if we go off of that, we won't. That stuff. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I got a
Mr. Marshall?
comment that's really not part of that, or request that's really not part of that administrator's report, but probably would be a future administrator's report. Is it appropriate now?
Sure.
I've had some comments from constituents about, I guess it's real or perceived increased traffic presence by the police department, and whether that's getting driven by some budgetary things or whether we can get some kind of feedback on that. I've had a number of people address me, seemingly that there's an increased presence with traffic control or speeding or those types of things. I personally have not witnessed it, but I at least mentioned that I'd mention it.
Happy to do that. We'll do that probably at a committee meeting.
Okay.
I would agree with you.
Any other comments?
Thank
Scott?
you. Yeah,
Well,
just
one
kind of
other
go.
point,
Whatever. Yep,
unless
sorry.
there's nothing else on
Yep.
that.
Go ahead. Is that okay with Doug? Go ahead. Go ahead, Scott, and then
Wait,
we'll have Doug.
did Doug have something to add?
Doug does
Yeah,
have
go ahead.
something.
Go ahead, Doug.
Go ahead, Doug.
And the last point that I had on this administrator's report is the Canyon Proud campaign. Each year, the city has budgeted funds for the Canyon Proud campaign, as well as does Fremont County. The city coordinates our efforts with Fremont County. There's a campaign that comes forward. That campaign, again, this year will be kicked off on March 21st and will continue through April the 30th. The city will have about 175 vouchers, plus or minus, to issue this year. They would be issued on a one voucher on a property first come, first served basis. So, if you came in and said, hey, I'd like 5 vouchers, you wouldn't be able to get that. You could get one per property. That has happened in the past. But, our goal is we wanted to issue one per property. We wanted to try to give as many people the opportunity to take advantage of this as we possibly can, given the funding that's available. It would allow people to come in and get a voucher to be able to take, household trash, old furniture, construction debris, what have you, out to the disposal. And hopefully it will be able to help the, people to clean up our community. Canyon City residents will be able to pick up a voucher here at City Hall from 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. And that would begin, again, on March 21st. And, it would probably behoove people to come in early. Hopefully these vouchers will go quickly, so get here soon. If you live outside of the city limits, you can pick your vouchers up over at Fremont County Administration Building. Of course, their hours, I think, are 7 or 7:30 a.m. to 5 Monday through Thursday. So, again, if you're outside the city limits, go to the County Administration Building to pick up a voucher there for this purpose. Last year, we had a number of partners that participated in this event. Twin Enviro Services have been very helpful over time. RD Recycling, Junk Masters, Call It Gone Metal Recyclers. We're hoping, again, that we'll be able to firm up the participation of these or maybe some others, but we want to get that firmed up here pretty quick, so we got a nice partnership for 2016, so we hope people will watch for this and take advantage of the opportunity. So that's it for tonight.
Thank you, Doug. And thank all of you for the retreat, for the time that you'd spent and everything. I appreciate that, and thank you, Doug, for helping us there. Mr. Havens.
Just one more statement on the vouchers. That's for one level pickup load. I've been out there myself, and there have been disputes as to how much one can bring. So if we do the same type of voucher, it's one level pickup load.
Yes, they will. If they have more than that, they will get charged at it, and it's on their permit that they get.
Okay. Well, moving on, are there any requests, Kathy, for the to speak to city council?
We've received 2 written requests to speak to council on an item that's not on the agenda. First is Paul Fisher, 299 Savage Loop, wants to thank you for listening.
Again, my name's Paul Fisher, 299 Savage Loop here in Canyon. And I want to thank the mayor for the informal meeting that allowed us citizens that attended last Thursday morning. He calls it Coffee with the Mayor. But it's an informal setting that allows the citizens to talk to not only the mayor, but I want to also mention Ashley Smith and Dennis Weed, who attended that meeting. And I think it's important that the council members hear what the citizens have to say. They'll say something in an informal setting a lot quicker than they will in a formal setting, such as this that we have here this evening. And I'd like to encourage each one of you council members from time to time to go with the mayor wherever he holds the coffee with the mayor, and just listen to what the people have to say. There was a number of things that were discussed at that meeting, and if enough of you get involved, I think it'll be very fruitful. And I appreciate your time here this evening, and that's really all I have to say, other than the fact that I'm very much in favor of a 1.5% sales tax to repair our streets, and I'll come back and address the council in March at that time regarding that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher.
Thank you.
And if I could, the next Coffee with the Mayor will be March the 11th at 8 o'clock at Jumpstart Java. No? I'm sorry, it won't.
Good time.
Good times. I'm not having good time tonight, am I? 8 o'clock at Good Time Cafe. And I was absolutely thrilled at the number that we had out. We had about 40, I believe, that came out. 8 o'clock at Good Time Cafe. Thank you. Anyone else?
So we have one further written request to speak. It's from Martin Welch. He wants to talk about roads.
Council, Mayor, first of all, I'd like to congratulate the mayor and those newly elected and recently elected council members. I pray that you would continue
Martin,
to
can I
lead
have
our-
your address? Excuse me, can I have your physical address?
374 Humboldt, Canyon City.
374 what?
Humboldt Drive, like the mountain. And I pray that you would continue to lead our community with fairness and with common sense and with a heart to serve our community. I'm here to discuss the road maintenance. It's been on the topic a lot. I didn't know if it would be on the agenda or not today. I've heard a lot about a tax increase. I'm not neither for or against it, but one of the things that I would like to at least address that I haven't heard address is the poor quality and the substandard, unsatisfactory quality that the chip seal has been done around the city on a number of roads. The chip seal's not adhering. It's leaving a lot of loose gravel on top of the road. Effectively, I'm really nervous, I'm not used to doing it. Making the roads almost like gravel roads. It damages automobiles, it diminishes the marketability and appeal of properties located on those streets. You know, the other day I stopped in the middle of one of these roads and was able to get out of my car in the middle of the street, not on the side, and pick up a handful of gravel that's left on top of the road on a road that was chip sealed months ago. A couple of examples is Harrison Avenue around the 3400 block, Dahlia Avenue up in the Glenfield Meadows subdivision off of Reynolds, or Field, excuse me. Greenhorn Drive, Eagle Crest Drive up in Dawson Ranch, one of our best neighborhoods in the community. They're butchering the chip seal up there, and Riverside Drive. So, you know, we talk about getting the community behind the street repairs. In my opinion, I think there needs to be some sort of accountability on the quality of work that's going to be done. And I think that if there's going to be, you know, talk of us, you know, myself, you know, another 1% on my property taxes, I'd like to, you know, some sort of guarantee or accountability that the work's going to be done in a professional, long-lasting manner and not something that's going to begin to deteriorate within months of being done. You know, something that's going to actually be a benefit to the community instead of ending up being a detriment to those people living on those streets. So I just had a couple questions. I don't expect you to answer them now, but number one, has there even been an acknowledgement that certain chip seal jobs have been done in an unsatisfactory manner or substandard? If so, what's the plan for repairing or going back and fixing these streets? Another question, what is the quality control process in place regarding repairs for the streets? You know, I'm wondering, is there an independent third party that goes back and checks the work and says, yes, this is good enough, or no, this is not good enough? Is there an independent third party that does that, or is that just handled within the Canyon City government? So those are some questions I like to throw out there. I do appreciate all you guys do, appreciate the time that you sacrifice to serve us, and appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Would anyone care to address any of those questions? Maybe a Public Works Committee meeting or something like that, that'd be best.
We talked about chip seal and how it's done and so on in past committee meetings, and we'll bring that forward again for all of you, so.
Okay. I just want to clarify that 1% is sales tax, not property tax. So,
And I think the city engineer has a presentation this Wednesday coming up for the street department.
okay. Anyone else? Thank you. So, resolution number 6, 2016, a finding petition for annexation in substantial compliance, the Sam and Dawn Smith. Could we have a report from the city planner?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Sam and Don Smith own 2 properties just directly north of Sunrise Mesa. Excuse me, and they filed a petition to have their property annexed into the city. And the properties total 11.3 acres, and they're currently vacant. The petition has been compared to the Colorado Revised Statutes, and it's been determined to be in substantial compliance with those requirements. Therefore, you have a resolution attached to your staff report that makes that finding and sets the date of April 4th for the public hearing. And in the meantime, on March 15th, the Planning Commission will, as their Annexation Review Committee, they will review and evaluate the annexation according to the criteria that's in the city's annexation policy. That really is the conclusion of my staff report. This is very short. So there are, the Colorado Revised Statutes are in your packet. The petition from the Smiths is in your packet, as well as a map, and also the resolution. If you have any questions, I can answer them perhaps for you, as well as Mr. Havens.
Thank you, Ms. Bernath. Yeah, it's pretty cut and dried. The annexation is. Are there any questions of council? Any comments, questions? Mr. Weed?
Yeah, I don't know that I saw it specifically in here, but it might be in here. Is there some requirement regarding the amount of the property that is contiguous with the existing city, or does it simply have to be adjacent?
There's a 1/6 contiguity requirement, and this far exceeds that. The whole southern boundary and part of the eastern boundary shares a common boundary with the city.
Okay.
So it satisfies section 107.1 and also the Poundstone 2 amendment, which is section 30 of Article 2 of the Constitution, in that more than 50% of the applicants own land, own more than 50% of the land. So we're there as far as finding substantial compliance. At the next hearing, you'll find eligibility and suitability, our local process.
Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments to council? So what we're doing here, as I understand, is setting it forward for a public hearing.
Finding substantial compliance
We're
and then
finding.
setting the public
Okay.
hearing and giving the clerk instructions.
And it will go to planning commission and then back to city council.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I'd ask then for a motion from council. Mr. Weed?
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Make the motion to approve resolution number 6, series of 2016.
Second?
Second.
Mr. Ekstrom? Would you call the roll, please? Oh, discussion on the question, on the motion? Any discussion on the motion? I'm new at this. Okay, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Weed?
Aye.
Councilmember Ekstrom?
Aye.
Councilmember Sharaki,
Aye.
Councilmember Schumacher,
Aye.
Councilmember Gill,
Aye.
and Councilmember Meisner.
Aye.
Approved by unanimous vote.
Thank you. Okay, number 8 on our agenda, ordinance number 3-2016, an ordinance regulating the cultivation, sale, and use of marijuana and marijuana products by unlicensed persons. I will need 3 to introduce, Mr. Meisner, Mr. Weed, and Mr. Ekstrom. Could I have a report from the city attorney?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members.
I need to read it by title first.
sorry.
Sorry, Tavis.
That's
I
probably a
saw
good
that.
idea.
Go ahead.
It's not a good idea. This is a bill for ordinance number 3, series of 2016, a land use ordinance providing for local regulation with respect to the cultivation, sale, and use of marijuana and marijuana products by unlicensed persons within the city of Canyon Cities.
Now, could we report for city attorney?
Certainly may. This ordinance, in a little bit different form, came forward to the prior council, which referred it back to a committee of council, and now it's back before city council again. Essentially, as I've tried to outline in my memorandum, we've discovered over time, and more so last summer growing season, summer and fall growing season, a growing number of complaints associated with unlicensed growing of marijuana, particularly in backyards. Neighbors have been affected in many cases as they relate to us. Their complaints in significant ways that are affecting their well-being and enjoyment of life when they're dealing with the cultivation of marijuana plants in adjoining or nearby backyards. So the ordinance, as it comes to city council, is intended to not eliminate, but to place some restrictions on marijuana cultivation within the city. First, as to what we call recreational marijuana, there already is in the constitutional limit to 6 plants, 3 of which are mature, 3 of which are immature, which may be grown by any adult individual in the state of Colorado. The city does not, through this ordinance, restrict that right, which may or may not be a constitutional right, but that opportunity to grow up to 6 plants. It does limit the places where such marijuana may be grown, such recreational marijuana may be grown, and it does restrict the number of plants in a household, grown by persons in a household that can consist of multiple individuals, to a maximum of 12 plants, again, with respect to recreational marijuana. And the other thing it does is, if I didn't mention it, it restricts the growth to the premises, the actual premises where the grower lives. Within the premises, there are 3 options a recreational marijuana grower would have. One would be to grow up to 6 plants inside a residential unit in a confined, secure space. The next would be within a garage in a confined, secure space, and then thirdly in an accessory building that could be in the outer areas of the residential, primary residential area, but still within 4 walls in a contained environment. So that's what the ordinance would do with respect to recreational marijuana. Limitations, but not elimination. As to medical marijuana, a different constitutional amendment was adopted back in 2000, which provides a somewhat different set of rules with respect to that form of marijuana. This city, as most of you, if not all of you know, authorized the use and the cultivation of medical marijuana through an amendment to its zoning code to recognize that use. And since that time, which was in 2010, medical marijuana facilities have been authorized in certain locations within the city. In addition to those opportunities, medical patients and medical caregivers, persons who help patients who have debilitating medical need for marijuana, or who might benefit from the use of marijuana, have a right to cultivate plants in their own right. This ordinance, if adopted as written, would restrict the growing of medical marijuana by private individuals to their personal residences and restrict such growth to secure areas, but includes a provision that expands the definition of secure area for purposes of medical marijuana to open backyard grow areas that do not exceed 100 square feet in size. And by the way, there have been a lot of talk along the way with this ordinance about grow areas, and all of the grow areas, whether it's recreational or medical, as provided for in this ordinance now are 100 square feet. What a medical marijuana grower could do that a recreational marijuana grower could not do is cultivate out of doors, as long as the area is confined to the 100 square feet, and as long as the growing area is not within 20 feet of an adjoining residential structure, and provided that there is a fenced backyard to surround the area where the medical marijuana is being cultivated. Council, at its last look at this particular ordinance, determined that 6 plants might be insufficient with respect to medical growers, increase the permitted number of plants, and that's what the ordinance does, from 6 to 8 in the case of marijuana patients who not only have the red card, the registry identification card issued by the Colorado Department of Health and Environment, but also have a doctor's authorization or medical documentation that allows a patient to cultivate more than 6 plants, which is otherwise the minimum under the state constitution and associated legislation. And that's for a single grower. As to multiple patients in the same household, if at least one of them has the right, has an identification card and an authorization to grow greater than 6 plants, then a maximum of 16 for the entire household could be grown. And that, again, is recreational plants. As we've discussed many times before, there are other identified restrictions and limitations identified in the litany of potential unlawful activities associated with marijuana cultivation. These are pretty straightforward. It's acquiescence to building codes, fire codes, plumbing codes, electrical codes for the safety and welfare not only of the cultivators but first responders and many others, including neighbors. There are requirements that flammable gas of certain sorts not be used. There are requirements limiting the types of lighting that may be used to grow marijuana indoors, and a few others that I believe you're already familiar with. So if you were to adopt this ordinance as drafted, it contains the expanded provisions with respect to medical marijuana, and we've done a redlining of the ordinance so these things would tend to be easier to find. There's a little bit of change in the definition. Oh, by the way, we added a definition of patient that neither doesn't change anything in the ordinance, but I thought would add a little more clarification. And we added a few more references to some of the applicable law that is associated with the text of the ordinance. So in the definition of secure area, we made mention of that increase from 6 to 8 plants and from 12 to 16 plants that was requested by the committee at the latest hearing. And then and that's toward the top, toward the middle of page 3 of the draft, of the bill for ordinance. And then if you go to page 5, toward the middle bottom of the ordinance, there was redrafting of subsection B of section 1734.020 to again restate what I understood to be your request regarding numbers of marijuana plants grown by medical and recreational marijuana users. So that section changes. There are other minor changes to the ordinance that cover the expanded cultivation area and some renumbering changes that just were format items. So let me share with you one more thing. It was in your packets, and then I'll respond to questions. I attached a letter that I believe it's not signed, but is authored by, I believe, the executive director of the marijuana division of the Department of Revenue. As we all know, the cultivation and use of marijuana remains a crime under federal law, and with the acquiescence of the existing administration nationally, Colorado and other states who have enlarged their laws to allow medical and recreational marijuana, there are some concerns that have been voiced by authorities of the federal government, particularly those from the Department of Justice, which I think reflect on what we are doing and what we should be doing. Toward the middle of the second page of that letter, I'd like to read just a little of it. There was correspondence back and forth between our governors, the governor of Washington, and various, the United States Attorney General and others. And it's recounted in this document from the Department of Revenue. And the salient part to me reads as follows. Through this correspondence, mentioning the exchange of letters and other documents between the U.S. and the states, the United States Department of Justice has clarified that it will continue to enforce the Controlled Substance Act in Colorado, so no change there, but it will not challenge Colorado's ability to regulate the retail marijuana industry in accordance with state law, based upon the expectation that the state and local governments will implement strong and effective regulatory and enforcement systems that address public safety, public health, and other law enforcement interests, which include concerns regarding public health and safety, which include a desire on the part of local and state governments to stop, to the extent possible, legalized marijuana falling into the hands of minors, and to keep marijuana grown in this state within the boundaries of this state. So this letter had to do with recreational marijuana, but it applies equally, in my opinion, to medical marijuana, and I think it's a call for all of us, including local governments, to both enact strong regulatory provisions and enforce those provisions, and that's exactly what we're trying to do through Resolution Number 3, 2016.
Thank you, Mr. Havens. Are there any comments or questions of council?
I have a couple questions.
Ms. Strachey?
To you specifically. I'm a little concerned with prohibits, I understand adversely affects neighbors, but the smoke, if my neighbor wants to smoke cigarettes and it affects me, I have no grounds. I'm a little worried that we might open a can of worms with smoke.
Offensive odors would be the cornerstone of that, and it becomes a matter of degree, I would suggest. If there's an occasional whiff of something that smells bad to a neighbor, that may not be enough, but if there's a constant, persistent odor that lasts for months, such as we had last summer in several locations, that might be enough. That's one thing I failed to mention. Thanks for bringing it up. We've done through this ordinance, if adopted as drafted, we've provided that anything that's unlawful under this ordinance also constitutes a public nuisance, and therefore given the city a second tool rather than going through the criminal courts through which these issues may be encountered, and that would be our set of nuisance ordinances, which again are designed to abate and eliminate nuisances as opposed to cause situations to become confrontational. Some might, hopefully most would not, but it's an extra tool.
And secondly, I know this is a residential problem. Is this specifically to encompass all zones within the city?
As written now, it covers all property within the city and restricts activities to primary residences of those who wish to cultivate marijuana. It doesn't restrict in other fashions. Those who use, possess, and so on do not have to contend with this ordinance in terms of their use or their possession, but it does address directly cultivation and does limit in a direct way cultivation of primary residences, single-family residences, I should underscore.
So how would this affect a commercial, so this would be separate from the commercial entity, if a commercial entity came in licensed and wanted to grow more than that
If the
amount?
ordinance were adopted as written tonight, it would affect commercial as well as individual growth if the commercial were unlicensed under the state and the city licensing systems. Those systems for medical marijuana have been in place since, I think, 2010 or 11. Those things don't change. But so licensed medical marijuana centers, licensed cultivation operations associated with either centers or infused product manufacturing still are legal activities within the city. Now, if you adopt this ordinance and later on a new form of business is recognized by the city and goes into operation, you could draft legislation subsequent to this that would exempt out such commercial activities if it were deemed by the city council to be appropriate to do that. So right now, there's a prohibition. That prohibition, because you are the legislative body, could be adjusted, lifted, or otherwise changed by acts of this body.
Mr. Dodson?
Could I'd like to come back and address that. And I think that John kind of laid it out that, this is really taking the city forward in terms of a pending issue that probably needs to be dealt with. I mean, we've all heard this and so on. But in my mind, this is the first step of maybe what might be several steps. And the city attorney just referred to that it may be that we will have to take a step to deal with, other commercial types of entities or so on that may want to do something. I think it would probably behoove us to come back to the city council, talk about those things, figuring out, is there another step that needs to be taken? What is that step? And then move forward if we do believe that there is. I personally believe that there is another step that we probably want to take, but I do believe that this is a big first step to try to get our hands around this and make sure we're trying to do the right things in our residential areas. But I don't think we're done yet. I think that we still have another discussion.
And I agree with everything you've said, and again, it's within the power of this body to legislate in the context of something actually being presented to you that makes sense to you and appears to comply with the city's laws.
Mr. Meisner? Don't hurt yourself.
I already did.
It's just a
I have a question, and it's kind of regarding some input, and I don't know whether I address that here or we do it for the discussion part, or is there going to be a discussion part? Or let me throw out my question, and then, as we all know, we brought this subject here because of complaints, and also because of the problem that it was difficult, apparently, for the police department to go in and enforce the existing grow areas or grow operations or whatever you want to call them. It's my understanding and my intention that this would clarify that so that we've got a document that's much more black and white so that our police department could in fact enforce this in municipal court.
I think it would clarify and simplify. Obviously, the prosecutor's office would have to be on board, and they've got their own set of priorities, so they're not always going to be on board, but the existing District Attorney has indicated he will listen to the police if they have marijuana prosecutions they think ought to be conducted. Plus, it gives us the municipal court tool that anchors not on criminal concepts, but on nuisance concepts.
And what goes along with that, I don't know that it's appropriate time-wise, but I don't know that we've had the chief give an opportunity to give his viewpoint on, and what my interest would be in terms of the enforcement of this from a chief's perspective.
Chief and the deputy chief are here, and I hope you'll let them speak.
Okay, I'd like to finish up at this point with the city council. Any other comments?
Just one comment. I would never want to see our code enforcement officer put in any type of dangerous situation. I hope he knows, and we would hopefully have the support that we'd hear from the police department, that he would be escorted to these properties and make sure that his safety, our code enforcement officers, men or women, safety is our #1 priority when dealing with this. This is a touchy issue, and I just hope hopefully we have the police department supporting that, and they can work together.
Try to address that point, because that's a very good point and it's not just for this. There are other situations out there where our code enforcement officers, not just related to marijuana, but others, they have a tough job, because what they're doing is that they're not necessarily making people happy all the time. And our police department and our code enforcement people have a pretty good working relationship, that when the code enforcement officer needs that backup, they are there very, very quickly, and they usually go together so that there is that kind of coordination, because you're absolutely right. We want to make sure those code enforcement officers are taken care of and not put in a situation that's dangerous for them. So I thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I think maybe 100% of the time with these situations.
Anyone else? In here, it says that discussion from council. Can the mayor say some things too? Would you?
This piece of legislation, we have never prohibited the mayor from commenting.
Thank you. I too agree with Doug. I think our state passed a law, and because of all the intricacies of it, it's evolving. And I think I would like to hear an agreement of parts, as Doug said. This is the first step. We have others to do from there. I think there's some good ideas that will help the public that are out there that we should look at next, and we should direct staff to involve themselves in that from us so that we can take that next step. And do I hear any comments on that?
What I see here is last summer we had some very serious situations from odors and such that were infringing on other people's properties. And I think that this ordinance pretty well slims that down. It addresses the problem that has occurred. And I am in agreement that there are other steps for other types of zonings and everything else to perpetuate this. But like I said, I think this probably will do what we intended it to do by making a neighbor not have to endure the obnoxious odors and such and high traffic by a grow area in their neighborhood or around their home. I feel that this is probably the right step and addresses a situation that's been brought to us on more than one occasion.
Thank you. Okay, then. Could we have the Chief of Police, Mr. Schultz, Chief Schultz, address us, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. We've been working on this with Mr. Havens. He's certainly taken the lead on it, but we have reviewed this several points along the way. And we think this ordinance does give us more teeth, if you will, to enforce some of these issues that have been occurring. We did have a series of complaints throughout the year on various things. We did have some crimes that occurred as well involving these grow operations. And frankly, we didn't have a lot of enforcement tools, so this does help. This is a step in the right direction. I would absolutely agree with that. It also gives us, as Mr. Havens said, two directions to go. One from a prosecutorial perspective, a criminal prosecution, and also from a civil standpoint, which is very, very important, being a public nuisance. The odor complaints were quite serious, and we didn't really have any tools to enforce that. So, yes, in summary, we would support this very much, yes. We think it's a step in the right direction.
Any questions for the chief?
Does this ordinance give you the tools to feel confident when you walk up to make a decision and make sure that things are right?
Well, as Mr. Dotson said, I think this is a first step along perhaps the road of many steps. It's a good first step. It's a solid first step. Can we anticipate every issue that's going to come up 2 years from now with this? I don't think anybody can. But no, it's a good, strong ordinance for us, and we would be in a much better position than we have been. We've been not in a good place with this for the last couple of years, but this would make us much more able to enforce the law. Absolutely, yes.
Thank you, Chief.
And I also would add that we would be glad to assist the code enforcement office with any of their contacts. I would go so far as to suggest that they not respond to any of these without us there. And we would be glad to go there with them, because I think there's the probability here for all types of other activity that goes on that we should be there.
Okay, thank you. We'll then open up to discussions or to comments from the audience. I would ask anyone that would like to come, like your name and address, and we'd like to hold it to, if you have similar comments on the same issue, that we don't hear repeatedly over and over and over again. So we'd like to have any comments from the public. Who would like to go first? I need your name and your address. You're allowed to do that.
Thank you. All right, my name is Allison Helsley. My address is 94 Eagle Drive South. And I have to enter in my password so I can see my notes. Hold on one moment. First thing I wanted to address the council tonight is really in regards to myself. I know that we were kind of talking in general terms about what I'm trying to do with the city. And in an effort to help other residents not go through what I went through last year when my house was taken over and there was nobody to respond. My goal with these red lines, just really quickly, is to help empower, protect the neighborhoods, the landlords, the police, the firemen, and to also provide a place for medicinal growers that's outside of neighborhoods. Section 5, Chapter 17-34-010, the intent, authority, applicability, and interpretation. Section 5. I propose that, actually, I'll skip that one and just go to the meat of it. Chapter 6C, or Section 6C, applicability. This chapter shall apply to all property within the city. I propose tonight that you add the qualifying terms where zoning is residential property and the property is habitable within the city limits. Either that or work with me to grandfather myself. 6F, there's a couple different sections within this that I think we could summarize. It would help law enforcement and code enforcement, firemen, protect themselves and have more power without taking away different rights. 6F, if it is unlawful for any person to use any lighting for indoor cultivation of marijuana, I changed it in my red lines to state simply that that is unsafe and therefore does not pass state or local electrical and fire code inspections. I think that limiting and specifying the exact lights that can or cannot be used is limiting for future. And I think it's specifically was designed, or the spirit of it was meant to limit fires. So we can, sorry, I don't know why I'm so nervous tonight. You guys have to
You're okay.
excuse me. So
I could tell
I guess
a joke.
it's because my business is on the line
No,
of being
no.
shut down.
No.
Let's see. 6J was written in a manner that I don't know exactly how you would enforce a recommendation. My proposed change was marijuana cultivation within a residence shall include proper ventilation and filtration systems designed to ensure odors from cultivation is not detectable beyond the property line and is designed to prevent mold and moisture. Thought that was a little simpler and a little bit more empowering. Under penalties, 1734-030. One of the problems that I see with this ordinance is the penalty section. As a landlord last year, I mentioned that my house was taken over and there wasn't anybody that I could call that would help rectify the situation for me. The way that this is written, it doesn't really clarify who would be fined, whether it's the landlord, whether it's the tenant. And if it's the landlord, I have a serious problem with that. I think that finding out that your house has been destroyed and then being fined is problematic. It's not the spirit of the ordinance. I think that if somebody is going to be fined, they should have the power to remedy the situation. So I added in the words, Section A, any person who violates any provision in 1734-020, excluding subsections J and O, that was already there, and here's my red line, who also has the power to remedy and who also has the ability to do so without incurring personal liability through another law or ordinance, is then guilty of a misdemeanor. It continues on. My point is I think that we should clarify who is being fined and not fine somebody that doesn't have the ability or power to remedy the situation. There's no reason to add insult to injury, especially in a situation where somebody doesn't have the ability to actually remedy it. Those are my main. I have other suggestions to help you empower and strengthen the ordinance. But really, I guess at the end of the day, I really hope that you guys take into consideration that the business that I created rents space to personal growers outside of neighborhoods. This ordinance, in effect, puts me out of business. While I understand the desire to ensure that there's not a bunch of businesses like myself that pop up and that there are additional steps that the city would like to have to make sure that we've got some standards, understand that I want to work with the city to create the standards. That's why I created the model. But I don't want to be out of business tonight. Thank you.
Just a minute. Any questions of council?
I think she brings up a very good point. What if someone took one of these vacant properties that we have recently discussed and decided to do something with it and the lien process doesn't really apply? Yeah, it's just another question.
The ordinance addresses violators, and the violators are going to tend to be the cultivators. But if there were an owner of a place where marijuana is grown contrary to the ordinance, and that owner refuses to do anything about it, then I think you could charge both the owner of the property and the grower, the cultivator of the marijuana. That's commonly done in enforcing nuisance ordinances, done every day.
Would the landlord be able to go when going through the eviction process? It's pretty time consuming. Would they maybe have some sort of pardon for the fines?
I don't think the landlord who evicts a tenant who, unknowns to the landlord, grows marijuana in excessive amounts or contrary to the ordinance would be charged at all. There wouldn't be need to cut slack. It just wouldn't happen.
Okay, so you don't see that ever being a problem?
I mean, the problem would be a landlord who says, yeah, I know it's as happened last summer. I know it's happening in the backyard, but I'm not going to do anything about it. These are my friends.
But it's important to understand that if the landlord doesn't have the ability to actually evict, it doesn't matter if they're their friends or not. If the state law allows them to be there and their lease doesn't specifically prohibit it, which I'm actually trying to educate and help landlords understand how to write their lease right now. But if their lease doesn't prohibit it, they don't have the ability to actually evict. And if it's not a criminal offense, there's no police to call. And if it's not a lease offense because their lease wasn't written correctly, they actually can't go to civil court either. So there's some problems that we have to address that And if you feel, John, that no one who, you know, tried to do the right thing or, you know, had no ability to do anything would ever be fined, that's fine. It's just not how it reads. The other thing is that I'm not sure exactly how the tenant would rectify the situation if they were growing their medicinal plants and there was no place for them to move them within city limits. There's no way for them to rectify that either. And I'm talking legal growers here. Whereas if I were in business, you could legally move them there. And if the police were unsure of whether or not somebody was legal or not, they could move them to my facility as well. There's a lot of things that happen with my facility that could help the community that currently without me are to rectify.
Okay.
I respond in two respects. One
Okay.
is, you're absolutely right. We're at 100% agreement that the best approach for a landlord is to write a lease in such a way that you control that activity, cultivation of marijuana. And even if there's a constitutional right, and you know that I won't go that far in my thinking, you could still prohibit within your place the growing of either form of marijuana, in my opinion. But secondly, now I've lost my train of thought on the second point, but so we're both having a bad night. But again, the goal of everybody, landlord and city, and maybe some tenants, is to rectify the problem. And certainly a cultivator of marijuana can do in plants that should have been grown there. The second point I was going to make is if this ordinance is adopted, it probably helps landlords in eviction proceedings because it stands as a violation of local law, which would be a grounds for an eviction under state law governing those matters. So I think it helps rather than hurts landlords caught in your very situation.
And from that standpoint, I do agree it does help as long as it's not one where you're incurring a fine during the process. And the last thing I was going to say too is that we have to take into consideration that there is quite a few caregivers that have moved to the area, and I was unfamiliar with what a caregiver was until last year when I unknowingly rented to one, and he had the ability to grow 600 plants in my house. For those of you that are unfamiliar, as I was, you can have a doctor's recommendation up to 99 plants, and as a caregiver, you can have 5 patients. So you multiply that out. That's how we got to the 600 count, and I was unable to get him out of my house. I have since learned some of the reasons why there are caregivers, and I've also learned that there are some risks of completely getting rid of that position through an ordinance. One of which would be that if you say to somebody that you're no longer allowed to grow except for in your primary residence, what you're essentially doing is telling all of these caregivers they can no longer grow for anyone else, even though they have that license. So what that will do is instead of having one house with a large plant count, now those personal growers that had deferred to their caregiver to grow on their behalf will now grow for themselves, which is going to increase percentage of grow houses in neighborhoods, which I think that's where my business kind of comes in to help as well. So just some cause and effect things I wanted to bring to your attention that I learned during this last year of insanity. Thank you.
Don't go away.
Okay. I'm trying to be respectful of time, sorry.
Mr. Weed?
I was going to see if John was finished, and then I'll...
John's finished.
I'm finished.
Okay. I've got a couple of questions here. And our stuff is renumbered here, so I kind of lost track. You had raised the issue of the various types of lighting that may or may not be allowed. You had a concern before that, something about homes that are habitable.
Oh, yes. Thank you for bringing that back up. Section 6, item C, applicability.
Okay.
Currently, it reads that this chapter shall apply to all property within the city. And I propose that we change that language to say that This chapter shall apply to all property within the city where zoning is residential property and/or the property is habitable within Canyon city limits. It's trying to basically state that regardless if it's a residential neighborhood or it's industrial or it's commercial, if it's zoned just mixed use where people are allowed to live, having this ordinance apply to neighborhoods where people live. To basically come up with language that would separate me from residential neighborhoods.
Yeah. What's your current zoning?
Commercial.
Industrial.
It's commercial. Everything else on my street is industrial. However, I'm the odd block that is commercial. I'm in the industrial zone though. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's all I've got for right now. I'm reasonably confident as far as the issue of changing the language regarding exempting a landlord who's trying to kick somebody out. I think we're okay there. The question I do have is, if we approve this, what is the immediate effect on Ms. Helsley and her operation? And how will we deal with it if it makes her illegal?
I think
Or not illegal, but
I didn't want to
non-compl-
go here, and it might, but I will. Our zoning code, pass this out. Section 1712.030 provides, unless a use, this is the zoning code, is designated as a permitted use, conditional use, or special review use, or is classified as a legal non-conforming use, it is prohibited. That's the state of the law in the city of Canyon City today with respect to this particular business operation. Now there's a remedy, and that is that the city, through its planning commission and council, revise the zoning ordinance to include the type of business Ms. Helsley operates, if that's the choice, to one of those uses that is permitted, or a special review use, or a conditional review use. It can't be grandfathered because grandfathering happens when an existing legal use becomes illegal through the operation or adoption of a new law. Yeah, so grandfathering in this circumstance isn't one of the options, but certainly amending the zoning code to acknowledge, to recognize this use and finding a place for it, staff thinks special review use is where it fits, would remedy the issue. But it's one of those steps, and we don't agree on that. But that's my opinion on that matter. It's prohibited as we speak.
So prohibited currently, but we had talked about multiple steps in this process, and that is potentially one of the sooner than later next steps.
What,
That
as,
is
as the zoning
But I would like-
administrator, what I've told to Ms. Helsley is that, John laid out the interpretation of the zoning regulations. I think he, Terry, myself, we've all kind of looked at that. Allison has sort of a different interpretation, if you will. My point is that I would like to set that aside for the time being. We'll face that question when we get there. I don't know that we're here to say to Allison, nope, sorry, you got to discontinue. I think we're here to say, we need to get this ordinance in place to deal with the major issues that are facing this community right now. Second, there are going to be subsequent steps, as I mentioned earlier, that I think that we're going to have to go through, and her operation, or some version thereof, is probably one of those next steps. Is it okay to, for example, if you're not able to grow something, if you're a medical marijuana patient, and you have a card and you live in a multifamily unit and you're not able to grow in a multifamily unit, what are your opportunities? You can go buy it, but are there opportunities to go grow it somewhere? I don't think we're done here yet. And I think that what we're saying right now, at least what I've said as a zoning administrator, is let's set that issue aside for the time being. We know that there's more work to do. Whatever that turns out to be, I don't know, but we need to bring that back to the city council. We need to have a debate, a dialogue with the community, figure out what the appropriate next steps are. And if at that time we feel that it's appropriate to allow something in an industrial zone, whatever it may be, we take that step, how her business fits into that, we'll figure it out at that time. I don't necessarily want to sit here tonight and say, nah, sorry, you're out of luck, or anything else. I think we got to take this in reasonable steps and deal with it appropriately. And if we have a business here that's a great model, I think that's great, and we'll get there and deal with it appropriately at the appropriate time.
I'm inclined to agree. I'll just say that. I hope that makes you feel a little better.
It does and it doesn't. I love the idea of working with the city to create something that helps everyone, and I want to truly work with each one of you to create that model. On the same token, I'm unclear if that means that I have to tell my tenants that they need to bring their plants back to their homes, like tomorrow. So,
That's
if it
where I'm at.
what does that mean?
Yeah, what is it? I mean, we're talking about the fact that we don't want to put her out of business, but if we pass this ordinance, is she not effectively not in compliance?
Well,
And-
she's already not in compliance.
Well, John
So,
wouldn't, or Doug
according
did not.
to one
Doug didn't want to
interpretation.
say. So it's,
Yeah.
My
no
point
one will
is-
say formally, but
My point right now is, I'm going to carefully say this, is that the code enforcement officer is not going to show up tomorrow. We will, enforce this at the appropriate time if we need to enforce it. And to me, we got to take these next steps. Unfortunately, we just can't get our hands around all of this, right now. So we got to take it in logical steps, and at the appropriate time, if we have gone through the process and it's still, and we feel that it's illegal, then we deal with it. If we feel that at that time that it's a model for, what we adopt, then great. But we need to take it in logical steps. So.
Okay, and then my other comment has to do with just this issue of lighting. I don't know the first thing about growing plants indoors, other than put them by a window, which is where most of my plants are. Either that or they're suffering. But she did raise the issue. I mean, I don't know if any of these different types of lighting are necessary or preferred or even desirable for growing cannabis. But is there a way to say this maybe without prohibiting them if it's done safely? No? I mean, I don't know.
my suggestion on that was to just simplify it by saying that if it meets all electrical, health and safety and fire codes, it's good. Because if you have somebody come in and say, hey, this meets the existing electrical codes, fire department feels it's safe, it would be easier, especially as there's new developments and new technology and different things that come into place, rather than, limiting or addressing specifics on things that we're not really experts on.
I mean, I can see where having very high heat, high intensity lamps in a closet is a bad idea, whereas it may not be a bad idea in a metal building.
Dennis, Ms. Hensley, is your concern over the verbiage in the first sentence or the fact that we're excluding specific types of lighting? I'm open to retaining the second paragraph or second sentence that limits those high heat intensity lights, but then I'm open to that first sentence maybe not being so specific. Does that make sense?
Yeah, to me, I see two things with it. Is one, it's really specific. So, if there's something else that comes up, you've limited yourself. And on the same token, is anyone here an expert in any of those lighting, in those lights?
Say that again?
Is anyone here an expert in those lights and understands what they each are?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I understand them all.
Okay. So with that being said, there's different areas where they maybe make sense in different areas where they would be a fire hazard. And I think the spirit of this is to try and prevent the fire hazards, correct?
And I think if you take the second sentence, that's the area that becomes a concern.
We had a member in the audience raise his hand when we asked if there's any experts in the room. Mind if he steps forward and maybe educates us?
Okay, we'd have to finish Ms. Helsley.
Okay.
Are we finished talking to Ms. Helsley?
My pure suggestion is just from, I've written different manuals throughout my career as a compliance person, and when you get really specific, sometimes you end up limiting what your intentions are. You get really into the specifics, and I think the specifics are the goal here is to try to basically prevent fires. And I think that if there's a way to word it in a manner where it addresses electrical codes and fire codes, and actually I had put in, and I will send this out to you guys in an email so you can see my red lines as well. But in one of the areas I had suggested that if anybody does any alterations to a home, whether it's like electrical, HVAC, ventilation, structural, any actual physical alterations that would impact the health and safety, that it's required to get a fire inspection done prior to cultivating. There's different things that you could do to address your goal without having to list what equipment can and can't be used when that can be outdated, and we're not experts. Does that answer your question or make sense?
I mean, I guess the way I would say this is, are these prohibited types of lighting prohibited for any other indoor uses? Or is this a prohibition specific to the cultivation of marijuana? And if so, it doesn't make sense.
I believe some of those lights can be used for home grow, like tomatoes and, just different homegrown
Yeah, I mean,
gardens. So there's levels that are safe.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for me?
Not right now. Thank you.
Well,
Is there anyone else, and again, if you're to enhance what has just been talked about, to enhance what she said? Anyone? Yes, ma'am? Remember what the rules are. I have the mic. I have the hammer too, whatever it is. I've got the button too. Yes, sir. Would you state your name and address, please?
My name is Nathan Robinson, 729 Elm. The thing I'm questioning about is the lighting. Everybody, if you're going to cut into the wires and do something with the lighting, I can understand eliminating it. But all lighting is UL listed, so everything has been already approved. So all you do is you plug it in and use it. If you're going to go and cut off an extension cord or extend it out, I could see where the codes would come in. But eliminating certain lights for growth, I mean, you can use it for all kinds of stuff, plants indoors. So just eliminating it to a specific light, I think that wouldn't work. I mean, if you've got people out there cutting through cords and wiring it in themselves, yes, there should be codes. If they're just using it, plugging it into the wall, I don't think there should be any restrictions to what kind of lighting you buy or what you use. That's kind of how I feel about it. I've been growing for many years. I know certain places you grow. For example, one gentleman said you don't want to put a light in a closet. Well, of course, if it's high heat, you're going to kill your plants. Maybe an LED in a closet, less heat. So it really depends on where you're growing, how you're growing, and especially if you're outside. Like I grow outside during the winter. I need those lights that put off the heat to keep my greenhouse warm. So it really depends on how you're going about putting the restriction on what lights you need or what they can use, sorry.
Any questions, the gentleman from council? Thank you.
I do have one.
Yes, Mr. Meisner.
So, educate me here, is that if you have, particularly, let's say an outside grow, you're telling me that the amount of light or looms is going to be more dictating for the situation than the types. So whatever you're doing, you're going to need X amount of light to accomplish the grow.
Correct. Yep. For example, you have T5 fluorescents. They put out, one T5 uses, we'll say about 30 watts, but only puts out, say, 3,000 lumens, where a high-pressure sodium bulb puts out 115 to 140 lumens. So you get a lot less light intensity from that than you would from a T5. So you're really eliminating the quality and the quantity. I mean, a lot of people like quality in their medicine. I'm looking at it in medicine aspect, not the recreational. I know recreational, you know, is there, but I'm more on the medical side of it. So when I'm looking at my product, I don't want to look at something that someone grew in their closet that's growing on a T5, where I can get something that's got higher cannabinoids, higher THC, everything that I'm looking for in my medicine, grown with a better lighting. So you're going to be restricting the quality too as well.
Thank you.
Questions? Mr. Havens, comments?
Couple of comments. I don't purport to be an expert and probably never will on lighting. I can tell you the source of this particular paragraph is the City of Greenwood Village, which followed a lot of contact with first responders, more particularly firemen than policemen, and this was their recommendation. Now, does that make it foolproof? Probably not. I don't see that the ordinance changes much. If you did strike the first sentence, it probably isn't going to please everybody if that's all you do. But I think there's been enough that has happened where unlicensed marijuana grows have occurred, where fires have been associated with operations, and I would agree, usually because of jerry-rigged systems. But it's one of those watch points that I thought important to address. The ordinance survives with or without it, or with some amendment to it, but it seemed to be a life, health, safety matter, and that's why it's included.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, sir. Anyone else from the audience? Yes, ma'am. Would you come state your name and address, please? And ma'am, remember, you're trying to enlighten us something different, not the same path.
And be careful. I'd rather not give my address, but I'll give my name if I could, just because of what I do.
You live in the
I
city?
think that's part, yes, I do.
Okay.
My name's Janelle Armstrong. I do live in the city. I have a husband that is off of 5 opiates because of medical marijuana. I think, as you can tell, there is undecisiveness. And I also think that we're looking at medical because of retail issues, that it's been a couple of years. I've heard everybody say a couple of years. That's when retail was instated. Did you see this in 2005, 6, 7, when medical started coming up, or before retail? I just urge you to take that time to look, because you're punishing cancer patients, you're punishing skin cancer patients, people that would be reliant on 4, 5, 6 opiates instead of their marijuana.
Is there a comment on what we're contemplating here in the resolution?
Yes, that when I was at the previous meeting for this, it was even said that they would allow another way for us to be able to facilitate, you know, if we were out of compliance. By not allowing Allison, for example, that is not a true statement. So we really need to take into consideration all of that, maybe bench it and talk to some people that are a little bit more knowledgeable, for example, on lighting and things like that, before you start restricting patient rights.
Okay.
Because that's what you're talking about, is patient rights here.
Yeah, and that's what we had said, that would be a two-step process, and this has evolved over many years, and we're trying to learn from it, and it will probably be a two-step process. Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the audience? Okay, then, is there any further discussion from the city council?
So,
Members of council? Mr. Meisner?
is it reasonable that we could come up with, for item, I guess it's item E, new E on page 6, a simple description that whatever lighting they're going to use, we would want, I don't know the exact terminologies, but we would want that to be UL code approved or something that would give us a generic description saying that we basically want safe lighting, but we're not going to specifically limit or not allow specific types of lighting. Is that reasonable to find something there, John?
Here, let me comment.
It may be, it might take a while to find that. I could try. I could suggest one thing you could do is adopt it tonight, and you'll have a chance to amend it in 2 weeks or thereafter when you consider adopting on second reading. That may not be a satisfactory answer. I think it's, as I tried to say earlier, I think this paragraph is in there for a purpose. It doesn't undermine the whole ordinance if it's changed, but I don't know how much work it would take to make it read better than it does now.
But, yeah, my comment, I think it's overly restrictive. And the first sentence, I think it's possible to get rid of the first sentence because the way it's written right now, you couldn't use an incandescent light bulb to grow a plant, which is probably perhaps still the most common form of indoor lighting. So maybe not the most efficient for growing plants, but it would be prohibited, and that seems a little bit over the top. As far as the prohibition in the second sentence, I don't know exactly how you'd word it, but you could end the sentence. They're prohibited. What I wrote is unless approved by a fire and electrical inspector. I mean, that's.
Well, it'd be two different inspectors, and if it's both, that may be the remedy.
Yeah, I mean, and I would say have both fire and electrical inspection, but I mean, so my suggestion would put some words, would be to eliminate the first sentence and modify the second one with some inspection requirements for safety.
Direction?
Do we not already cover that with wherever it's at with applicable codes and what have you?
We might, but I like the idea of emphasizing a look at lighting.
Okay, I'm open.
Mr. Ekstrom?
Yeah, the fire chief had read this resolution and he liked it the way it read. Since he is the one that's directly involved with this particular circumstance and lighting and the fire hazard, could we adopt it and then amend it for a second reading after the fire chief has had a chance to take a look at that and address those issues?
But we can adopt pending amendment, right?
Yes, we can.
Oh, can we? Okay.
It's yeah, I guess we could do that, because I would suggest in any event striking the first sentence completely, but we can do that at the same time we consider an amendment. Yeah, I mean, because if it's the fire chief who's going to be approving and he doesn't approve of any of these, he's not going to approve it, so.
We could take it to the fire chief. I don't know whether we can find an electrical inspector, but we could bring back one or more alternative versions of that paragraph.
Okay, is that agreeable to everybody? Can we move
Works for
on?
me. Yeah.
Mr. Meisner?
No, I'm saying let's move
Oh,
on.
good. Thank you. All right, then. Could I hear a motion that we approve subject, do we do it subject to later amendments?
I think that happens
Just
by
approve.
operational, you wouldn't.
Okay,
you-
got it.
You have a right to amend on second reading.
Yes, good. Mr. Ekstrom?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I move that we approve a bill for ordinance number 3, series of 2016
On first reading.
on first reading.
Here, a second?
Second.
Mr. Meisner? Any discussion on the motion?
Yeah, it's the understanding of council that we're going to see probably an amendment for the second reading.
Yes.
That doesn't need to be in the motion, it's in the
No.
record. It'd be in the minutes.
It's in the minutes of the meeting.
I would like to see, I want to know the process for how we're going to enter people's homes. If the code enforcement can maybe bring down here, I just want to know.
Let me say one thing. It's been reported that I said, and if I did, I misstated, that we could enter homes without a search warrant. We could do that only if invited into those homes. If it takes a search warrant to enter a home, we would have to get a search warrant.
Feel much more comfortable. Thank you, John.
Okay. Would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Ekstrom.
Aye.
Councilmember Meisner.
Aye.
Councilmember Sharaki.
Aye.
Councilmember Weed.
Aye.
Councilmember Gill.
Aye.
Councilmember Schumacher.
Aye.
Approved by unanimous vote.
Okay. There being any more business, I'm going to adjourn this meeting.